Mr. Chairman, I'd like this video submitted to the Congressional Record. The New American Magazine has an article entitled The Spirit of the Founders and Freedom from Big Tech Tyranny by John Larabelle. He writes, when Donald Trump announced that he would be launching an alternative to big tech, his Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG, which includes his Twitter/Facebook alternative Truth Social, he was echoing the spirit of the Founding Fathers. Indeed, what Donald Trump and others are doing now in setting up alternative media outlets can be seen as a microcosm of what the Founding Fathers did in writing the Declaration of Independence and then setting up a new government in the late 18th century. He's right. In colonial America under the king, the press was heavily censored. Monarchs in Europe had learned to fear mass literacy and a free press since the 1500s when Martin Luther set the world on fire by using the Gutenberg printing press to get his message out about corruption. The church was split, and kingdoms went to war. The king in England therefore saw mass literacy as a threat to his power, so even after the first printing press made its way to America in the 1630s, it was heavily censored. Slowly, the king's ability to control free speech was eroded, and a revolution happened. Here's an excerpt from historian Charles Beards's History of the United States talking about it.
The evolution of American democracy into a government by public opinion, enlightened by the open discussion of political questions, was in no small measure aided by a free press. Thanks to the schools, few and scattered as they were, and to the vigilance of parents, a very large portion, perhaps nearly 1/2 of the colonists could read. Through the newspapers, pamphlets, and almanacs that streamed from the types, the people could follow the course of public events and grasp the significance of political arguments. An American opinion was in the process of making, an independent opinion nourished by the press and enriched by discussions around the fireside and at the taverns. When the day of resistance to British rule came, government by opinion was at hand. For every person who could hear the voice of Patrick Henry and Samuel Adams, there were 1,000 who could see their appeals on the printed page. Men who had spelled out their letters while poring over Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac lived to read Thomas Paine's thrilling call to arms.
While a monarchy can exist with an uninformed populace, a republic is the result of a literate populace who can discuss the issues of the day. Ever since the rise of republics, however, there have been those who have sought to roll back our freedoms and return us to the state of serfs. Sadly, big tech is undertaking this activity now, but their actions are not without precedent. I was reading Tim Wu's book, The Master Switch. In it, he covers early censorship efforts in America with the rise of movies. In Chapter 4, he writes about the Motion Picture Trust under Edison, called the Motion Pictures Patent Company. Edison held the patents for most of the technology to make a film, so to produce one, you had to go through his cartel. Of course, his organization was in clear violation of antitrust laws, as we can listen here.
The trust's defense against price-fixing charges was fascinating and colossally unpersuasive. In court, they openly admitted their purpose of dominating the film industry, but they argued that their existence was necessary, both to improve the art of cinema and to perform censorship on behalf of the government, fulfilling a neglected function of the state. The trust proposed, in effect, that it was due an exemption from the law, because, as a private regulator of free speech, it was performing a public service. The claim to be a surrogate censor probably seemed less bizarre in that jurisprudential and cultural climate than in our present one. Nevertheless, the theory failed to impress the courts, and the trust was unable to strike a life-saving deal.
It's interesting that today, Google, Facebook, and Twitter are using the same rationale to avoid antitrust laws, namely that they're surrogate censors for the state. Just as that reasoning didn't fly for Edison, big tech is heading toward a big crash, though as of yet, they're still too blind to see it. As philosopher George Santayana said, those who do not know history are condemned to repeat it, and clearly, big tech hasn't been reading its history. Instead, they're trying to cling to power by sucking up to the Democratic Party and offering themselves up as a sort of shadow government that can do an end run around the Constitution and oppress us in ways that the government wouldn't dare to. In the end, we'll see how that works out for them. The John Birch Society provides a national program designed to counter the big government agenda and to restore our rights. Standing for constitutional freedoms for more than 60 years, the John Birch Society has been the force that protects and restores American liberty and independence. Check them out at jbs.org.